Now we're going to go to our exclusive with longtime Wheel of Fortune host Pat Shack. He's sitting down for his first interview since he had that emergency surgery that temporarily forced him off the show. After over 4 decades of smiling contestants, spinning wheels, and effortless charm, Pat Shack shocked longtime viewers when he finally revealed the real reason he walked away from. Some believed he was pushed out. Others suspected behind-the-scenes drama, contract disputes, or tensions that had brewed quietly for years. But when Pat finally addressed it himself, his explanation wasn't what most people expected. And in some ways, it was more surprising than any rumor. It wasn't about fame, money, or exhaustion. It was something far more personal. And depending on how you look at it, his decision could be seen as either bold and surprisingly controversial. Pat Shack reveals his breaking point. After decades of polite smiles and perfectly timed quips, most people know Pat Shack as the calm, collected host who made Wheel of Fortune feel timeless. But long before he became synonymous with spinning letters and easy banter, his journey began far from television glamour. And it didn't always follow a predictable script. Born Patrick Leonard Sajak on October 26, 1946 in Chicago, Illinois. He grew up in a working-class environment that offered more grit than glitz. Chicago, shaped by industry and resilience, became the backdrop for a boy who would later master the art of composure under pressure. Unlike many television personalities who carefully planned their rise to fame, Pat's path would come through unexpected turns, starting with a love for broadcasting that would eventually send him overseas into a war zone before guiding him back into living rooms across America. During the 1960s, Pat attended Columbia College Chicago, where he studied communications and developed a natural comfort behind the microphone. He didn't wait for permission to pursue radio. He jumped in early working as a DJ while still in school. But just as his broadcasting dreams began to take shape, life threw him into a completely different setting. From 1968 to 1970, Pat served in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War. While many were sent into combat, Pat's weapon wasn't a rifle. It was a microphone. He became a disc jockey for Armed Forces Radio, greeting fellow soldiers with the now-famous line, "Good morning, Vietnam," echoing the same style later popularized by Robin Williams in film. Even in the middle of conflict, he brought levity, comfort, and familiarity through his voice. It was proof that he had something rare, the ability to connect through sound alone. Returning to civilian life after Vietnam, Pat didn't waste time trying to rebuild his broadcasting career. The 1970s saw him transition into television, landing a role as a weatherman for KNBC in Los Angeles. Viewers noticed something different about him. He wasn't just reading forecasts. He was entertaining without trying. His subtle humor and calm tone stood out in a city packed with personalities aiming for attention. And someone important was watching: Wheel of Fortune creator M.V. Griffin. In 1981, Griffin made a decision that would change both their careers. He selected Pat Shack to replace the original Wheel of Fortune host, Chuck Woolery. At first, some network executives resisted the change. They thought Pat was too low-key, maybe even too ordinary. But Griffin insisted he saw something others didn't. A host who wouldn't dominate the show, but would let others shine. By 1983, Wheel of Fortune launched in national syndication, and Pat Shack was suddenly everywhere. The format was simple: spin the wheel, solve the puzzle, win a prize. But what made it work wasn't just the game. It was Pat's ability to make contestants feel at ease while keeping viewers entertained. He didn't try too hard. He didn't steal the spotlight. He simply guided the show like an old friend sitting across the room. His charm wasn't loud. It was steady, and America embraced it. Within a few years, he wasn't just a host. He was part of daily life. Millions tuned in not just for the prizes, but for the comfort of hearing his voice at the end of the day. At the height of his success, Pat decided to test his versatility. From 1989 to 1990, he hosted The Pat Shack Show on CBS, a late-night talk show designed to compete with Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. It was a bold move and a risky one. Competing with Carson was nearly impossible. And despite Pat's charm, the show struggled in ratings. Within a year, it was canceled. For some, that might have been a crushing defeat. But Pat took it with the same dry humor that defined his hosting. He simply returned to Wheel of Fortune without bitterness or embarrassment. Failure didn't dent his legacy. It simply reminded people that even the most composed personalities take risks. Throughout the 1990s and beyond, Pat's presence on Wheel of Fortune only grew stronger. In 1997, he officially cemented one of television's long-strung partnerships when he began co-hosting full-time alongside Vanna White, a duo now so iconic that their chemistry is considered television history. While many hosting pairs are built on scripted banter, theirs seemed effortless. He guided, she revealed. He joked, she smiled knowingly. Their rhythm never needed adjustment because it felt genuine. Together, they made the show not just entertaining, but familiar, almost like family. As the 2000s and 2010s unfolded, Pat Shaq's personality became more defined. He wasn't afraid to show his sarcastic edge, tossing out dry comments that sometimes caught contestants off guard, but always with a twinkle in his eye. Beyond the stage, he occasionally shared political commentary on social media and contributed written columns. While some hosts carefully avoided expressing opinions, Pat didn't hide his. Still, even when viewers disagreed with him, most respected that he didn't let those opinions interfere with his professionalism on screen. In 2019, Pat faced one of the most serious challenges of his life when he underwent emergency intestinal surgery. For the first time in decades, he had to step away from the show, and Vanna White temporarily filled his role as host. The moment showed how much viewers appreciated him. Audiences were worried, and when he came back, appreciation was not taken for granted. His calm presence had become such a staple that even a short absence felt like a big deal. It was one of those moments when people remembered that behind the polished delivery stood a real person, not just some television fixture. Just 2 years later, in 2021, his legacy became officially recognized in the record books. Pat Shaq became the longest-running game show host in U.S. television history, surpassing the legendary Bob Barker. The achievement was acknowledged by Guinness World Records and was a testament not just to longevity, but to consistency. Hosting a show for decades without becoming irrelevant is almost impossible in modern entertainment. Yet, Pat managed to pull this off without reinventing himself or chasing trends. He remained true to his style, calm, witty, and unshaken. Pat Shaq's controversies and issues, while Pat Shaq's career has often been celebrated for its longevity and consistency, it has also been accompanied by a steady trail of debates surrounding his conduct and commentary. His legacy is peculiar in that his controversies rarely revolved around major scandals or legal disputes, but rather centered around subtleties, tone, phrasing, body language, or jokes delivered in moments that some viewers interpreted differently than intended. Of course, in an era where every broadcast moment can be clipped and shared, critiqued within seconds, the tiniest deviation from perceived politeness might turn into a trending topic overnight. Pat Shaq, being in the very forefront of daily syndicated television for decades, eventually turned into a regular subject of such scrutiny, especially in the digital era. Criticism of his on-screen demeanor developed gradually throughout his time hosting Wheel of Fortune. Some viewers started to question whether his dry wit was always well received by contestants. While his trademark humor often drew praise for keeping the show lively, there were instances where social media users circulated clips of him appearing seemingly impatient or curt. These ranged from mispronounced phrases by contestants to unusual responses, both of which would see Shaq offer sarcastic comments. Those fans who enjoyed his style believed the sarcasm made the show more human, evidence that even a polished production could retain moments of spontaneity and unplanned reactions. Critics saw some comments as belittling or otherwise dismissive and believed the host should not make contestants feel ashamed on national television. While these arguments ensued in quite significant volumes online, they never reached the levels of formal complaints from participants or disciplinary actions by the network, showing the friction mostly existed in perception rather than conflict behind the screen. The tension came to a forefront in 2021 during the lift and spin controversy. The clip in question saw Shaq joke with a contestant to unclog his mouth after he seemed to stumble through speech. Quick and lighthearted as the comment was, it touched a nerve in several viewers as insensitive. For those sensitive to issues of speech differences, the comment struck them as mocking or belittling those with impeded speech. Others felt it was just an off-the-cuff joke and well in line with SJ's long-lived character. The division mirrored increasing debate about what was acceptable humor in public venues. Though the network did not issue a formal release, nor did SJC publicly comment on that moment, discourse on it revealed how audiences had drastically shifted their expectations. What would have been written off as harmless banter in decades previous had become a moral point of examination in today's media landscape. A similar type of debate resurfaced in 2023 when a clip went viral depicting Shaq placing a contestant into a playful headlock. The action was unmistakably performed in jest and seemed to be received in kind by the contestant in question. However, the footage called into contrast opinions online. Some viewers laughed at the spontaneous theatrics, seeing them as unplanned humor that interrupted the otherwise predictable cadence of the show. Other viewers questioned whether contact like that was appropriate in a professional setting and at a time when concerns over personal boundaries and consent had reached the forefront. Critics argued that even if done in fun, physical contact should always be considered carefully, particularly when millions of viewers are watching and reacting in real time. Yet again, no official complaints surfaced from participants or producers, indicating that within the production itself, the moment was understood as lighthearted. Outside the studio, Pat Shaq's public persona extended beyond game show hosting due to his outspoken conservative views. Unlike many television personalities who choose to remain neutral in the public eye, Shaq made no effort to conceal his political leanings. Over time, he became known for supporting Republican candidates and engaging in political commentary, both in interviews and through written contributions. His long-term involvement with Hillsdale College, a conservative institution where he served on the board of trustees, further established his alignment. Supporters admired his willingness to stand by his beliefs regardless of public reaction, arguing that entertainers should be allowed political expression like any citizen. Detractors, however, felt that openly aligning with one side of the political spectrum risked alienating viewers who turned to Wheel of Fortune specifically for its apolitical comfort. Some argued that a figure associated with wholesome, neutral entertainment had a responsibility to avoid polarizing rhetoric regardless of personal convictions. This divide came to a head in 2014 following what became known as the climate change tweet incident. In a post on social media, Shaq made a sarcastic remark, implying that people who were concerned about climate change were unpatriotic racists. The exaggerated phrasing was meant to be humorous, but for many online readers, the tone crossed the line. Critics accused him of trivializing a major global issue while using charged language. As backlash mounted, SJAC eventually deleted the tweet and clarified that it had been intended as a joke. Nevertheless, the reaction demonstrated how quickly a single sentence could reshape the public's perception. Even longtime fans who adored his work on television paused to reflect on whether such commentary reflected poorly on his otherwise affable image. Wheel of Fortune's legacy in the field of controversies. While controversies and personal views have at times colored public perception of its hosts, the legacy of Wheel of Fortune itself tells a very different story, one built not on conflict, but on endurance, innovation, and cultural permanence. Long before its modern-day debates and headline moments, the show began as a simple concept: a spinning wheel, a word puzzle, and the thrill of guessing a phrase before time ran out. It first appeared in 1975 on NBC's daytime lineup, the creation of media mogul Merv Griffin, hosted by Chuck Woolery, with Susan Stafford standing beside him as the original letter-turning hostess. At the time, it was seen as just another daytime game show entering a crowded television field filled with trivia contests and variety formats. But something about the show's structure, its visual suspense, its familiar rhythm, and its everyday relatability quickly drew in audiences. Viewers didn't just watch the contestants. They played along from their living rooms, shouting answers before the wheel even stopped spinning. That interactive energy, rare for its time, made Wheel of Fortune an instant staple. However, behind the scenes, early success didn't protect it from tension. In 1981, a salary dispute between Chuck Woolery and NBC resulted in Woolery leaving the show, a pivotal shift in its identity. Enter Pat Sajak, a former radio host and weatherman who was